Hey family, it is comic book review time here with Jonathan Soul. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick an African American comic and I'm going to read, not going to read it. I'm going to kind of just go through it because I want y'all to pick it up. Okay, let's get started. So this first book that we're going to talk about, this first series is called The Sword is My Lady and the Lady is My Sword. The sword is my lady and the lady is my sword. A groovy kind of sword and soul, sword and sorcery kind of, world that Malik Shabazz created. You can go over to Malik-Shabazz.com, Malik with a K, Shabazz.com, or you can go to Comixology and you can find his books there. Now, of course, Comixology, you have the digital. You go to his store, you get the physical. I got both. If I really like a book, I buy both because I want to support the artist. I want to have access to the material no matter where I am. If I'm at home, I grab the paper. If I'm out and about, I grab the digital. All right. Now, he has this, this two-part series called The Laws of Men, 1 and 2. And that's what I got in my little bookshelf right there. But it's kind of, you need to get into the prequels before you get into those books. And so we're going to talk about the prequels. All right. We're going to talk about 3, and it's 3 of them. They introduce the 3 primary characters in this series. Okay, there's a witch, there's a warrior, and there's a young gun. A witch, a warrior, and a young. Okay, all right. So the first one, I'm gonna talk about the witch. Now her primary occupation is slave hunter. All right. Say slave hunter. That's right, slave hunter. Her name is Madeline Grimoire. Now that's how I'm pronouncing it. I'm probably fucking it up, but it's Madeline Grimoire. And she has a reputation of like being really brutal when it comes to finding these runaway slaves. And so they call her Mad Maddie. But we're going to get into that. First, let's step back just a little bit. Let me tell you about this overarching environment. Okay. Welcome to the planet of Alistair. Okay. Now, Alistair has 3 primary sentient races. Okay. They have the Magin. They have the Thasians, and then they have the humans. Okay. Now, every group of people is kind of, organizing themselves around not only controlling their territories, but manipulating this power called magic. And that's with a J instead of a G, magic. Okay. This kind of life force. That's a very powerful force. And now each group has varying degrees of acuity, right? They have, so the Magin have the most ability to manipulate this magic force. And they do it through sorcery, spells, or whatever. And then you have the Thasians who don't, as far as I can tell in the book, and Malik, correct me if I'm wrong, or somebody read us, correct me if I'm wrong on Twitter, but they don't have as much of an acuity to manipulate, but they do have some. They kind of are a balance between like maybe some of the magic and the technology, let's say, the Thasians. And then the humans got 0 ability to manipulate magic, but they got like mad technology. And so, all of these groups have been battling. They've been warring for a long time and so forth like that. And so, of course, with any war, you know what I mean? Sooner or later, people are going to start to make alliances. Why? Because you want the war to end, right? War is like the lowest state of man, right? So the 2 most magical groups of people decided to get together, become allies, and they kind of went against the humans. And the humans, they don't have no magic wands or anything, but they got some weapons. They got some missiles and ships and all that kind of stuff. And so, these 2 groups started battling the humans. And so what they figured out is, what? Maybe we can't, defeat them bullet for bullet, but we can trap them. And so they came up with this plan. They built this magical bubble around the kingdom of the humans, which is called Eleuthia. Am I getting that right? Hold on for a second. Looking at my notes here. Eleutheria. I was just call it Harlem, but no, that's not cool. So we're just gonna call it PG County. I go do that. That's not funny. Okay, so anyway, so they built this bubble around the kingdom of the humans, and they trapped them there. And all their bullets and all their weapons couldn't break through the barrier. Now, the challenge came in is the fact that there were some Magians who were trapped underneath the bubble in the human kingdom. Because, before the war, there were still people traveling back and forth and different things. Thasians would go to the Imaginary, maybe Magians go to, they was moving around. And so during the war, they got trapped. Yeah, so they got trapped. So, over time, the small group of Magians that were held in the human kingdom were enslaved. And that's what the humans did. There were Thasians there. I think they had a different fate. But in this book, we're just introduced to the slave catcher, the slave hunter, Madeline Grimoire. And so let's go there. So I told you about the different people, and the humans were trapped underneath the bubble. And so then we transition to the forest, right? This forest in one of the provinces where this runaway Magian is being hunted by a slave hunter. And this is where we get introduced to Magian. This is where we get introduced to Madeline Grimoire. And Madeline Grimoire, the slaves, the people, the Magians who are enslaved know her as a witch, and this Kari witch, and this Kari, I believe, mean like outcast or something like that. And so you say, what's the significance? Well, she's Magian too. So she's hunting her own kind of thing. And so Magians are not, without defenses. And so he's going to use his magic to, mount a defense against Madeline. And she's telling him that's not a good idea. And why don't you just talk to me? Let's come quietly. Now, I'm not going to go into the rest of the book, but let's just say there's a great battle that happens. And then we find out that there are layers to Mad Madeline. And we also find out that the Magian have kind of like an underground society, since they're trapped in, they are separated from their homeland. They're trapped in the human kingdom under the dome, under the shroud. So they developed, the people who have escaped the plantation, they've developed like their own underground society. And they're working toward a particular goal and so forth. And let's just say they have some, maybe an unlikely ally. Now, I'm not going to tell you the rest of it. Once you get the book, you got to go over to Malik's site to pick it up. All right. So that's the first character. It gives you an introduction to, the Magian, Madeline Grimoire, a.k.a. Mad Maddie. All right. Now, let's go to the next protagonist, Bolo Jenkins. Protagonist means hero, whatever, Just in case there are kids listening. Now, Bolo Jenkins is the baddest warrior that ever was, according to him. And I'm not going to argue with the brother because, as you can see, when we transition to his book, right, the second of the prequels, you see that there's a whole lot of warriors that just wasn't as bad as because they're all dead. They're all dead. And it looked like they were all taken out by this giant Cyclops that's coming out of the ocean. And it looks like that Bolo is the only one left. So he's got to be bad if he's the only one left. And so, there's something that Bolo is trying to achieve. It's not just killing or fighting this gigantic Godzilla-sized Cyclops with a blowhole on the top of his head. Bolo has something else in mind. And in his culture, he was born and raised a warrior. And in his culture, they have certain principles. One of them is that you don't serve anybody. And the other one is that the only defeat for people of his ilk is death. All right. So now he's about to go for it. He's attacking this Cyclops head on. And what he finds out on this giant behemoth, that there's something called a war beacon that's stuck inside of or on top of this Cyclops. And it's something that he has to get. This war beacon is some magical weapon, and he has to get it. And let's just say in this particular attempt, he didn't do too well. And so enter the goddess. All right, the goddess, and as you read through, you find out her name. Her name is it sounds beautiful, kind of poetic. Ibankara Oisu. Ibankara Oisu. She just likes to be called Ebony. And I tell you, if gods look like this, I go back to church. So she finds what's left of our warrior, and she heals him. And the injuries were significant, but he's back from the edge, and they converse. So it's just those two that are alive. It looks like left on this island, and she's like, listen, the only way we're gonna get off this island is we have to join together. We have to partner up, and you have to bind yourself to me. And remember, I told you that his group of people, they have a couple of principles. They live by 5 to be exact, and one of them is you don't serve anybody. And so anytime anything sounds like any kind of servitude or bondage or anything, he goes off into this thing. I'm gonna say this once, Snowflake. No man, woman, beast, daemon, angel, or God has dominion over me. I swung the sword and split the heavens. I took 1,000 wounds, never shed a tear. Fire won't touch me because I'm too hot. Ice won't talk to me because I'm too cold. My name is Bolo Jenkins, man. And so he goes on, and did this whole kind of thing. And so I went overboard a little bit. That's cool. And you guys got to get the book. That's the kind of fun I've been having with this. Now, since I had the privilege of interviewing the author and illustrator creator of these characters, you know who Bolo Jenkins was inspired by? The bad guy in The Last Dragon. You know that, like, kind of, I don't know if it's a Bruce Lee spoof, but there was this kung fu picture, Last Dragon, with black characters. And so there was this, Bruce Leroy, who was like the Bruce Lee analog. And then there was this Jerry Curl wearing kung fu master. I can't remember the brother's name, shit. But so that's what Bolo Jenkins was kind of patterned after. So, it's kind of funny. You see some art and it inspires you to create other art. It's a beautiful thing. So we learned a little bit about the power of this goddess. She's just not a sexy girl walking around in a bikini. She has some serious power. And they go up against the Cyclops again. And, she finds out a little bit about herself. She didn't know that, she had a definition of God, and she finds out a little. And so while she's distracted, Bolo Jenkins is able to save her, which is kind of cool. And, so life for a life, I guess, I don't know. But they eventually are able to partner up and get off the island. And so what we're going to see is we're going to see these two in that series I told you, The Laws of Men 1 and 2. And we're also going to see Madeline Grimoire, Mad Maddie, in that series as well. And so let's go to the next prequel, The Young Gun. It's a little kid who is a terrific inventor, and he wants to play a big role in the life of the kingdom that he's born. He's been, he's a citizen of, I guess you could say. And so now, again, we're still under the dome, right? Still on the human side of things. And see his little kid, his name is Shell Bala. And, he's kind of play acting, right? With his weapon that he just created. And, over the, in the background, there's this coronation, not a coronation, but kind of like an election or selection or something, where there's this guy who's part of the royal family, and he's kind of going for king. And so this stuff is happening in the background. And while the little kid is kind of practicing, I guess, target practice with his gun that he invented. And it turns out that it's a real gun, but it doesn't shoot bullets, right? It does something else. He gets into it a little bit with, I don't know if it's his caretaker or whatever, landlady or whatever, but he kind of gets into it a little bit. So you can see, poverty is a drag. You know what I mean? Even if it's in the comic book. And so, long story short, we switch to I guess this the wealthier part of town, where some of the Thasians are, and they're talking amongst themselves. They're sitting at a banquet, waiting for the candidate for king to arrive, and they kind of talk amongst themselves. You can tell they're higher class economically of people, because they look down, on the lower classes and so forth. And so we see the guy who's his name is Oculus, of the Laurent family, and he's coming there, and everybody, oh yeah, kind of thing. He's coming to the palace to go through these different changes and stuff. Again, I guess he's campaigning for king. And again, we told you earlier that when the shroud was put up, right, when the dome, some of the Magians were trapped. And so you can see how, because they're so powerful, you can see how they're enslaved, and these guys look like, I don't know, they're projectors or TV cameras, or they're, spotlights or whatever. But you can see that they're magic. They've been enslaved. They got chains on them, and they've been used in these different ways in the human world. And so, hey, we see our little guy running through the crowd, trying to make it to the area, I guess, where this prince, I guess you could call him, is going to be. And I'm not sure where this uniform is coming from, but he didn't get it from the dry cleaners, because he says this uniform smells like ass cheeks and elbows. So it looks like he borrowed, or appropriated somebody's uniform. And he's going to whip out his gun, and it's like, oh, snap. What's this kid about to do? And then kaboom! You know what I mean? This light effect thing happens and so forth, and people are like, what the heck? What's going on? And then we see him in another part of the city coming up out of this portal. That's a good way to describe it, like a portal. And so he says, wow, I made it. Okay, so now he's trying to get his bearing, see where he's coming from, and he bumps into somebody. This guy, kind of debonair looking guy, and he's like, yo, man, what are you doing? Kind of thing. And it's funny because the kid is trying to explain that if you got too close to the portal, you could have been hurt. And he's like, whatever, man, whatever. And so this kid doesn't realize. He doesn't realize who he's talking to. And, eventually he does, but he's talking to the most infamous assassin in the whole kingdom, a man that goes by the name of Ashley Gray. And so this kid, first Ashley takes mercy on him. He just, pops him in the stomach real quick, knocks him down, and goes on about his business, goes on breaking into the palace. But this kid kind of gets drawn into this intrigue between this assassin, the king-elect, and a god. Because the god that we met with Bolo Jenkins isn't the only god that exists in this scenario. So this is the young gun, and there's more to it. There's fights and everything, and I'll say that, the way the gods, or the goddesses rather, dress, some frontal nudity, which I'm okay with. Of course, if you got a little kid, I wouldn't, you know what I mean? This is more like, I don't know, 13, 14, 15, 10, 12, 10, maybe not 10, but, 13, 14, 15 kind of thing. Kind of kid would really love this and so forth. And of course adults would, because I bought the digital and the print. And so these books are all part. The sword is my lady and the lady's my sword title. It's all part of that world. And so go over to comiXology.com to get the digital. You can do that right now. You can go over to Malik-Shabazz.com and you can pick up the print. I think each book is like $5 or something like that. And you can support this fantastic artist. All right, family, that's it. So I gave you kind of like an introduction, the briefest of introductions to the series. Go over and support the artist. Love you guys. See you next Wednesday. You can go to jonathansoul.com, listen to my other interviews. I do some fan film reviews over there sometimes and so forth. And I have a novel, a sci-fi novel, Malcolm Mars. You can pick that up as well. Love you guys. Hope our dreams come true. Support Black comics. Peace.